Imagine you're a small, flat country that has to fight the sea just to exist. And then you somehow become the place where Europe's goods move, Europe's money settles, and Europe's biggest risks get financed. You are watching Be Explained, and this is the Dutch cheat code. How a tiny republic ran the world. The key is, the Dutch didn't have one magic advantage. They didn't find a mountain of gold. They didn't have the biggest army. They didn't have the biggest population. They had something better. They built a smart setup where every part helps the next part. So instead of asking, how do we become the biggest, they asked, how do we become the most useful? Because if everyone depends on you, you don't need to be big. And that's the Dutch cheat code in one idea. They control the pipes of the economy, how goods move, how money moves, and how big trips get paid for. First, ships. The Dutch looked at the ocean and basically said, that's not scary, that's a highway. So they built ships that were made for one thing, carrying lots of cargo as cheaply as possible, not fancy, not heroic, just efficient. And once you can ship cheaper than everyone else, something important happens. People stop asking, what are the Dutch selling? And they start asking, can the Dutch carry our stuff? That's a huge upgrade. Because now you're not just a trader. You're the delivery service for everybody. But shipping isn't enough on its own. Because even if you can move goods perfectly, trade still breaks if people don't trust the payment. And in the 1600s, money was messy. Different coins, different values, coins getting weaker over time, constant arguments about what's worth what. So every big deal came with a little voice in the back of your head saying, am I about to get scammed? So Amsterdam becomes the kind of place where payments feel safer and clearer, where merchants feel like, okay, here, I can do business without panicking. And when people feel safe doing business in one city, they all start going there. And that creates a snowball effect. More merchants show up, more trade happens, more money piles up in one place. Now the Dutch are not just moving goods, they're becoming the place where deals happen. And once lots of money is sitting in one place, you can do bigger moves. Which brings us to the next part of the cheat code. And this is the one that really changed history. This is the risk splitter. Because the Dutch found a way to pay for huge overseas trips without needing a king. And without gambling one family's entire fortune. And you have to understand how insane these trips were. A voyage to Asia wasn't like sending a truck to the next city. It was like sending a floating city across the planet. You needed ships, cannons, skilled crews, food for months, spare parts, trade goods, and a lot of luck. And even if everything went right, you might not see profit for a long time. Before this, there were basically two ways to do it. A king funds it, which turns trade into politics, or a small group of rich people funds it, which means one disaster can wipe them out, and the whole project collapses. The Dutch solution was simple, but it was a revolution. They built a big company that could take money from lots of people at once. So instead of one person carrying the risk gets split across a crowd. People buy a piece of the company, a share, which is basically saying, I'm putting money into this engine, and if it earns profit, I earn part of it. Now the company can collect a huge pile of money up front and keep running voyage after voyage. And here's why it's a cheat code. If one ship sinks, it's still painful, but it doesn't kill the whole system, because the company isn't betting everything on one trip. It's running many trips. so the business can survive storms, wars, failures, and bad luck, and keep going. But the final upgrade is what makes this feel like the birth of the modern world. You weren't trapped. If you bought in and later wanted your money back, you didn't have to wait years and hope. You could sell your share to someone else. So now these giant, risky adventures become something ordinary people can actually take part in, because it feels like it's risky, but I'm not stuck forever. And that's basically the early birth of the stock market feeling we know today. People buying pieces of a company, selling those pieces to others, and turning massive, risky voyages into a public tradable business. The early version of a public company and a stock market being born right here. So the loop speeds up. More people invest. More money becomes available. More ships go out. More goods come back. More profit comes in. And it repeats. Now zoom out. Because at this point the Dutch setup is fully running. They made it easy to move goods, pay safely, and fund big adventures. And that doesn't just create wealth, it creates gravity. Trade starts circling around Amsterdam like it's the centre of the planet. But now we have to be honest about the darker side. This global trade wasn't just peaceful shopping, it was also backed by power, sometimes brutal power. There were forts, battles, forced control, and real suffering. So yes, the Dutch system creates incredible wealth and a modern way of doing business. But it's tied to empire and violence too. That's part of how the pipe stayed in Dutch hands. And this leads to the ending, because the moment you become the middleman of Europe, you don't just get customers, you get enemies. Other powers start thinking, why are we letting them collect the profit? Why are we using their ships? Why is their city the centre of everything? So rivals push back, trade fights turn into ship fights, and sooner or later the Dutch face the nightmare that every small but rich country fears. A moment where being smart isn't enough, because bigger countries show up with armies. In 1672, the Dutch disaster year, multiple enemies hit at once, and the Republic nearly collapses. They survive. But survival has a price, because after that the Dutch are forced into non-stop competition with larger powers, and then comes the final twist. The Dutch cheat code works until everybody copies it. Other countries learn the tricks. Better shipping, better money systems, better markets. And once bigger countries can do the same thing, but with more people and more resources, the Dutch can't stay number one forever. So the Dutch don't disappear overnight. They stay important and rich. But the world's centre slowly shifts elsewhere. And that's the lesson of the Dutch cheat code. The Netherlands didn't run the world by owning the most land. It ran the world by owning the pipes, the flow of goods, the flow of money, and the flow of big business. And for one sharp century, that was enough to make a tiny republic feel like the centre of everything.
This is Be Explained. If you want history without myths or noise, subscribe, because the past still shapes the present, and here it is explained.